I'm here again at Functional Training Summit in Munich, 2018 now, and I have another special guest here. And I was told, because I was actually figuring out who was another gem to get on the show, and I asked around, and people said, "Hey, this Josh Henkin guy, you should actually talk to him. He's really cool. He has cool stories." And Josh, now we are here, so welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
So I heard, first of all, you're from Las Vegas.
Yes, we've been in Vegas for almost 3 years now.
And now you're in Munich, and that's, I think, the two cities that probably couldn't be very much more different.
Sure.
Like, how do you like it here?
I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, when people think of Vegas, they think of the Strip, and we always tell people that's only 4 miles of Vegas, but that's, of course, what everyone knows. So we live by the mountains, and so it's actually somewhat similar in the idea of a nice landscape and the beautiful architecture here, and we lucked out with, like we were talking about, awesome weather. Even when we first came out here a few years ago, we came in the middle of winter. And you can imagine that's pretty cold for coming from the desert, but it just can't beat the amazing architecture. The people have been phenomenal, and I mean, how do you complain about the food, right?
Exactly, and yeah, and we were really lucky because actually last week there was a lot of rain, and I know the organizers were a bit afraid that people would be underwater here, but now we're really lucky, and we have an ice bath. Actually, did you jump into the ice bath?
You know, living in the desert, I'm not such a big fan of really cold, so I avoid the ice bath. For us, like I was joking, like, you know, we get cold around 20 degrees, so like, going that into ice bath, I'm like, nah, I'll wait till later. I did that when I was an athlete. I'm like, that's not fun, but you know, I can appreciate what they're doing.
All right, and actually, you're way now over here from Las Vegas. That's a long way. So now, I'd be interested in the story. How did you, like, eventually get here? How did that connection happen?
You know, when I was young, I was really into basketball as my sport. Growing up, you mentioned you were a basketball player, so you appreciate this. You know, I just fell in love with the sport, and when I was young, I was kind of taller than everyone else, so you naturally fall into basketball. But you know, when I was about 14, I suffered a really bad basketball injury. I had both torn up my right ankle. I grew up in Chicago, and we played at the parks all the time, and there was a crack in the basketball court. I landed around that crack. The foot went all the way around. It was quite disgusting, but
wow.
Freak injury, and you know, I recovered from it. But about 6 months later, I ended up hurting my low back very badly, and I think the ankle, and we can talk about it, like, was connected to that injury. I didn't know at the time, but I remember being just very depressed and frustrated. And my older brother wouldn't let me be pouty, and just for people that are listening to this, it's kind of amusing because I'm about 6'3". I'm not extremely tall, but my older brother is about 5'7". Okay. So, you know, he enjoyed it when I was young because he could beat me up, and then I quickly caught up, and he didn't like that anymore. But you know, he started to appreciate that. You know, what playing against him when I was younger sort of inspired my competitive nature, and so he wouldn't let me pout. And he's like, you know what, we're gonna go to the gym. And I'm like, the gym? I had never lifted before in my life. I'm only 14 years old, and like most guys do, what's the first exercise you do? Right, yeah. First thing we do, we get on the bench press, right? Like any good guy does. And I remember my brother just laughing his butt off because I was pinned by the bar, my legs are kicking up in the air. I'm like, and you know, older brothers as they are, they're just laughing at you, and eventually he took the bar off of me. But you know, at that point, it was kind of a choice I made. Like, either I could go, this is stupid because I'm not good at, or I was like, I want to get good at this. This is something I achieve. And I fell in love with strength training because, you know, I wasn't the most gifted athlete. I wasn't the fastest. I didn't jump the highest. So sometimes with athletics, I think it can be frustrating, and you can appreciate this because sometimes no matter how hard you work, you just can't be better than other people. And with strength training, I felt like if I put in the work, I always got rewarded. You know, whether, you know, in some type of way, whether it was hopefully, you know, being stronger, lifting more weight, looking better, or other attributes. So, and I was very fortunate in high school. I met a coach that was a strength and conditioning coach for our pro baseball team. And I didn't even know, like, strength conditioning was a profession. I'm like, there's a job you get paid to be in the weight room and train athletes? Holy cow, I want to do that. Like, sign me up.
And that was in Chicago.
That was in Chicago. And so I went to school in Arizona for exercise physiology. And I had all the intentions. I wanted to be a university strength conditioning coach. And then when I got there and I went to the university and I started doing internships, I'm like, oh, this life is not very good. They work very long hours, they don't get paid a lot of money, and they get fired a lot. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do this. This doesn't sound so good for the rest of my life. So I looked into, you know, going into a private sector and in fitness, and so that's where I got a lot of my start. But during that whole time, I fought this back injury. I fought, the pain that I still had. And so my passion was to learn as much about the body as I could, because the person I was trying to help first and foremost was just myself. Being only 19, 20 years old, I was the person at school who couldn't sit in the chair for more than a couple minutes because my back hurt so bad. I was, having a hard time just doing everyday things. So I just was so passionate about learning because I needed to help myself. And so I started to learn that there was so much happening outside of the university. I just started, interning with a lot of people that were doing very innovative things and very progressive things. So sometimes in school, it's hard to catch up with an industry because things change so fast. And I learned how things in school, they were good. It was good to learn the science, but it wasn't what was actually being done in the field. So that just stimulated my hunger for learning. And, through that process, I slowly started developing the system. And the system was always about me in a sense, which sounds very selfish, but I always say a lot of these injuries were a blessing because in the U.S. we have such a pain epidemic, and I think the reason most people don't exercise is they think it's going to hurt, or they hurt and they don't think they can do it. So being a role model, I think in some sense, and having such a significant injury and being able to be active and be fit and be something like, hey, exercise does not have to hurt, is really what we're about. And we really want to educate people on their bodies, because I think we're very disconnected from ourselves. And the more we can teach people what is movement. So we use a lot, we say sound bites and buzzwords that people don't understand. Like people still go to the gym and they're focusing on their muscles and how much their calories are burning, and they're missing the real quality of exercise and how it brings benefit to their life. And they think it's punishment, and we're trying to change their perception of, why should they exercise, how they should exercise. So that's really what I spend my time trying to educate both professionals and everyday people upon.
That's what I just wanted to ask you. Is there something, and maybe it's the same answer, that you hear a lot when it comes to strength training and fitness training that you consider completely wrong, that people believe, but it's just a wrong belief?
How much time do we have? No. I mean, we're in a great environment for this example. In the industry, there's this term that started in the 90s called functional training. And it was started as physical therapists like Gary Gray, who started a lot of this trend, realized what we were doing in the gym was very bodybuilding. It was a lot of isolation of the body. And what he understood about the body was we're very integrated. Everything we do in life and sport is very fluid and coordinated. And when you look at the gym, most times it's very segmented and robotic. It doesn't look like anything we would do in life or sport. And so he sort of started promoting this idea of functional training. And like most things in the world, I think when things get popular, they get misunderstood. And so people, when I ask even fitness professionals,
try to make a system that people easily understand, put it in some sort of drawer, put a brand on, like CrossFit, I would say, is sort of maybe something that took
absolutely.
off.
Like CrossFit will say they're about functional training, and people don't even know what the term means. And so when I ask even fitness professionals, what does functional training mean? They'll tell me, well, training for life. And I'm like, that sounds great, but how does that look like when you actually work with people? Like, what does that look like on paper when you're writing workout programs and designing solutions for people? And they sit there and they're like, I don't know. And so I try to educate them that's actually a methodology, that functional training was about increasing how the body functions, not too hard with the name, but most, even sadly, fitness professionals don't know how our bodies work. And so the point of exercise is always about teaching people how to move better. And people think, again, it's about stressing the body, but it's actually trying to make the body more resilient and better and more efficient. And unless you know how something works, it's hard to do so. I always give the example, I don't know much about cars. I'm a terrible car person. I know two things. You put gas in them and you turn the ignition on. That's about it. So if your car breaks down and you ask me to help you out, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to put gas in it and I'm going to turn the ignition on. That might work, but that's the only two things I can do. And I think that's how most people approach fitness. They don't have a bigger understanding, so they can't create better solutions. I often tell fitness professionals that the job of a trainer or a coach is to be a solution for the client. It's like the client's coming in with a specific goal. They want to achieve something. You're supposed to direct them. You're a teacher of that. And so it's like if you change your mindset, and and going back to your example of CrossFit, I have nothing against CrossFit, but when they say they're functional, they're really functional for CrossFit.
And that's what I said, because actually in some podcasts before last year, I mistook that for the same thing.
Sure.
And people actually said, man, this is not the same thing. We're a functional training summit here. This is not a CrossFit Games event.
And CrossFit's done a brilliant job of marketing it that way. It's like I give them credit that people do, and because they're so visible, I think people sort of do think they're the same. But one of the things I tell, we're a very young industry. I give the example, in the States, the American Beautician Society was founded in the 1930s. People that do hair and makeup, and our industry was founded around 1979. So it's a very, beauticians, people that do hair and makeup had organizations before people who actually try to help people with their fitness and health. So I think as a young industry, we don't know where we came from, we don't understand the history, we don't know where we're going sometimes. And so I think sometimes that hurts, and it doesn't allow us to be better for the people we're trying to make better. And so CrossFit, they're so visible, becomes like the reference point for everybody, and people don't know there's bigger ideologies and methods and thought processes than just CrossFit. And it's hard to change people's mindsets about anything that they become familiar with, right? Change is always difficult.
That's actually what someone told me, an example of between the difference. He said if Mozart, the piano player, went to a CrossFit gym, they would kill him.
Yeah.
And a functional trainer would actually try to make him sit straight at the piano so he wouldn't have any pain playing, but he doesn't have to look like a bodybuilder.
Right.
He just needs to have the strength in his back muscles to be playing correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just breaking down and people understanding what their body is supposed to do. And I think, sadly, we still think of bodybuilding as our baseline too. Like, I need to work my biceps and my chest muscles. And, example I give people is you can't pick up a pencil off the ground with just one muscle. So there's no reason to try to isolate everything. So whether your goal is to look better or to feel better, functional training is to teach your body to be more efficient. And so even when we talk with coaches that work with athletes, it's all about efficiency. It's like if you move better and you can perform better, you'll lift more, you'll work harder, so you'll get a better result, but you won't be in pain. And so I think it's just all about teaching people how our bodies are designed to work, and which is really, when I just did my presentation, it's simple things. And the old saying, I think as Einstein said, if you don't communicate something like in the most simplistic ways, you can't really understand it. So it's not about making things complex. It's taking complex ideas and then make them very simple for people so they can always understand. I always say our cues and the way we teach even fitness professionals is so that my mom and dad could understand it, because those are the people that we're trying to help the most.
Yeah, I can probably really agree to that one. So let's say someone comes to you for the first time. What is your process of identifying, first of all, maybe what the goal of that person is or should be? And maybe can you lead me through their process of how you approach just the individual? Because I like the individual aspect of your approach. And I'd be interested in just knowing how do you go about that.
Well, I mean, there's two different things. I mean, one thing that surprises people about our system is that it's a system. And I think that surprises people because a lot of people tell you they have a system, but really when you break it down, they have a bunch of exercises. And to me, any good business or industry has good systems in place. And so what we do is, no exercise is more important than the other. It's just where do you lie on this continuum? And so the job of the coach is to be able to identify that and know how to progress you and regress you if you need. What are we trying to build? So to answer your first part is actually connecting the individual is probably the most important part. Because, I can pretty much train any coach to be able to coach exercises. You can't necessarily coach personality. And I think a lot of the personal part of personal training is connecting with that person, whether it's in a group or one-on-one. And so when someone's, I always say I ask a lot of questions first, because I want to find the root of why they're really here. Because if someone says to me, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds, I'm like, okay, that's cool, but what does that 30 pounds actually mean to them? And when you dig a little bit deeper, you start to find out that, I'll give you an example. I've had a lot of female clients over the years, and they'll find out, well, they don't feel good about themselves. They feel like maybe there's a disconnect in their marriage and they're not, as romantic, and that they think that their husband thinks of them not as well. So if they lost 30 pounds, they'd have a better connection with their husband. So it's
they're trying
30
to fix
pounds.
the marriage,
they're trying to fix the marriage. It's not 30 pounds. 30 pounds doesn't mean anything. It's actually what they think that 30 pounds represents. I'm just giving you an example. Guys are the same too, that you want to find the deeper root, because if you keep it very superficial, then they get bored, sometimes they get frustrated, sometimes they lose sight of the goal and they won't do the things that they need to do to get to the goal. But if you get to the real heart of why they're doing what they're doing, then it's easier to keep their focus. It's easier to push through the times where it's a little bit more challenging and difficult, because they realize it's such a big impact to their life. So we try to get to really the root of why they're there and keeping them mindful of what they said was important to them. So again, it's never about weight loss, never really about lifting more weight. It's always about what they're really trying to achieve by getting those outcomes and solutions.
All right. And now then, the next step would, I assume, would be to enter them into the system and you're known for developing a system already now for over 23 years, I think.
Yeah, a long time.
And it's called the dynamic variable resistance training. Can you explain me maybe the foundation of that one and lead me through that one?
Sure. I mean, basically, it's just based upon how we as humans move. And I mean, that sounds simple, but I'll give you an example. The most fundamental human movement and what makes us uniquely human is walking. We're designed for locomotion or walking, and no one's gone to the gym and goes, hey, today I'm going to kick butt in my walking program, right? It's not in our mindset. And so, what we do is break down, how do humans actually produce motion? And we create exercises from a very foundational level to very complex to emulate those ideas and concepts. So the nice thing about a system is that you build it upon principles and methods, and then the exercises can become many. Mm-hmm. You have limitless ideas because you're basing it on principles, not exercises or things like that. And so the creativity can come out once people know our foundations of what are our principles, what are our methods. And once you understand those foundations, you can become very creative in how you progress people, but it's always layered on these principles. Our system is rather simple. It's based on how you hold the weight in relationship to your body, how you stand with the weight, and what direction you move in, which sounds super simple, but most people, they only progress by going heavier or doing more reps and things like that. And that's often not the best way to progress. Otherwise, people in the gym would be lifting thousands of pounds if that worked all the time. And I think what happens to a lot of people is they get stagnant, they hit a plateau, and they don't know how to keep progressing. And so by having a system where they have many different options or directions, that gives them a better way of continuing to have success, because I think all of us do better when we have continual success. Mm-hmm. And so I always give the analogy that our system is a map. It's a map of fitness depending upon their goal. And our job is to show them where to go. How far they go just depends upon how much they want to get and how far they want to go and so forth. But at least they know and they have direction with what they're trying to achieve.
So I assume it's not about the absolute numbers in a way, but it's more about the direction of where they're going and that they've experienced progress.
Yeah.
Do you have a couple, we call them KPIs in the online business, key performance indicators, but something that you would say, maybe even for you personally or for clients, is a good goal to have?
Well, I mean, I think the first one is, we talked a lot about today, and we had amazing stories that just happened to be told after our session of just getting people out of pain. I can only speak for the U.S., but we had this horrible pain epidemic where in 2012 we prescribed enough pain medication that every single adult would have their own bottle of narcotics, which is outrageous when you think about it.
Yeah,
and that's why we have an opiate problem, and I think it's the first time since the AIDS epidemic we have a decreased life expectancy.
Mm-hmm. And it's more people that die from overdoses than from car accidents even.
Absolutely. And I think it's just, and when you're in pain, not only do you have the drugs to worry about, but you have depression, you have anger, you have frustration, you have people that don't want to move because they hurt, so they become obese and they get other health problems. So I think the number one thing is just people understanding that exercise doesn't have to hurt and that we can actually make them better. I think most people in our industry hasn't done a good job of this because we're part to blame, think that when they have to train that it has to hurt. And it's almost like a punishment to themselves when they do it. So I think when people find that it can be enjoyable, that they actually feel better, then it inspires them to do more. We had a woman just come out of her session, I didn't even know this about her, that she said she broke her back about 8 weeks ago, and she's been in pain and she's been trying to work out, but she just can't. And she went through her session and she said she feels great. And so now she's motivated to do more. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just humans, it's just tapping into that most fundamental level. If we hurt, we don't want to do things. And it impacts so many different aspects of our lives. It impacts our relationships, it impacts our work environment. That's like our number one thing, because if you feel better, you're going to be more likely to do more.
Makes total sense. I talked about motivation this time at the Functional Training Summit, and the dopamine receptors are actually being damaged with pain. So you don't feel as motivated. It's
Absolutely.
The motivation molecule, so you don't get that neurochemical pathway going in order to keep going. And so that makes total sense to have that as a first goal, but I've never actually heard that from someone that I interviewed before. So
well, I hope it becomes more of a standard for our industry, because again, I'm sure it's not just a U.S. problem. I think it's a Western culture problem.
Yes.
And if we can get this idea across to people that they don't have to be in pain and they don't know, I think a lot of people, they're just frustrated. They don't know what to do. And when they think of exercise, it seems like the last thing they want to do when they hurt. And if we can work with medical professionals to have a better relationship and raise the knowledge of our industry where they have the confidence to send us their patients, then I think we can do more, because we don't want people on drugs. We don't want them on medications. We want them to understand there's better alternatives that make them healthier and happier than these drugs.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Actually, do you now in your everyday work more with coaches or with clients that actually experience pain?
I ran a facility for over a decade where we did that a lot, but now I work more with coaches, because part of my idea is if I have a facility, I can only impact X number of people, right? Maybe, even a good day, or a good year, 100 people, right? But if I work with 100 coaches over time, I can maybe help thousands of people if they can convey information. So it's been really rewarding to hear how coaches take back our information, and they send us stories of clients like this person, never would do this before, now they're doing this, or we were at a conference in Australia, and a woman, she's an instructor, and she's like, I can't squat anymore. I haven't squatted in 10 years because my knees are so bad. My doctor said, I can't do it. My knees are so bad. And she's like, can I still watch what you're doing? I said, absolutely. Watch and see what you can take away. Maybe you can use it for someone else. And, during a break time, she came over. She's like, can I try? I just want to try it. I said, okay, try. And we showed her what to do. And we obviously were cautioning her to be careful. And she did her first squat in 10 years. And I always, remember what she did afterwards. And I tell this story all the time because I think it's impactful for coaches to remember why we're doing what we're doing, is that she cried. She didn't cry because now she can get buff legs and it's awesome that she can squat again. She did it because, a lot of people in pain feel like they've had something taken away from them. And, I watch all the Marvel movies. I don't know if you into those at all.
No, very much so.
I think there's a great one with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and, Peter Quill says, we're a bunch of losers. We've lost a lot of stuff. And I think that's very relevant to people that are in pain. They feel like they've lost a lot. They've lost quality of life. They lost, quality of their relationships. And when you show them that's possible to gain that back, you inspire such great motivation, then they think they can actually get back a lot of their life. And I'm always cautioning people, too, that there might be a new normal, but we can get you better. We may not be able to fix you, but better is always possible.
Yeah, growth.
Yeah.
As long as people experience progress and growth, I think it's also in business or in terms of character and personality and pain and whatever, as long as you grow, there's a way forward.
Absolutely.
So, actually, that leads me to my next question. What activity in your job do you like the most? What is the most rewarding for you? Could be speaking in front of people, or is it working with individuals or coaches?
Both are different. I mean, I just love working with coaches because I think I can get into more details. When I work with an individual, I always try to meet people where they're at. And I try not to overwhelm them, and I try to always build success for them, because I try to remind coaches all the time that when people come to a fitness professional, it's a big action step on their part. That, getting through the door took a lot of action steps to get there. It's not so simple. I have to remind them that we're the crazy ones. We like to get sore and sweat, and that's not how most people work. And so when people get through the door, I try to make it always a win for them, where they end up feeling like they can do it. Because I think a lot of people enter a fitness program, and the biggest question they have is, can I actually do this? So once we show them that they can, I think that's awesome. I think with fitness professionals, it's just, I always have this goal of wanting to raise the standard of our industry. Being at Perform Better is great because they're doing a lot of fitness education, but I remind a lot of coaches, to the everyday person, fitness education almost sounds like an oxymoron. Like, you mean there's education in fitness? Like, people just think it's counting reps and doing exercises and, old Jane Fonda stuff. So I think, by working with professionals, we can raise ourselves to a standard more towards, physical therapy and health professionals. And instead of being necessarily fitness, I like what someone said this weekend, being a healthcare professional and being in that same light can really change the lives that we try to impact already.
And I think that coaches now, they take into account many more elements than before. It's not only, like you said, about weightlifting, but also in my industry, where we call it biohacking, but it's now the influence of electromagnetic fields on the body, sleep, recovery, mindset, stress in your everyday life. And that is being taken into account now, and people that go into that coaching sector, I think that they can't really focus that much on one thing and only do that thing. They have to sort of look at what else is happening in that life of that person that you're treating.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and going back to the history of what fitness used to be, it used to be called physical culture. And it was more about building the whole person than it was just your physical attributes. And we lost that over the years of being just about how you look. And they had much more focus on that. They were more focused upon the entire person, the lifestyle, and so forth. And so, yeah, you have to, because sometimes the reason that people aren't having successful has nothing to do with what they're doing in the workout. It's what they're doing the other 23 hours. You know, and so if they're, one of our goals as a coach is to be a teacher. So you have to teach people, because sometimes people need to be taught that, hey, you need to like get more sleep. Well, okay, how do I get more sleep? Well, maybe they just have bad habits in place that they need to change, because sleep is probably the easiest way to get people to lose weight.
Right.
But like, no one would argue like, I can get more sleep, awesome, right? That doesn't sound like a bad deal. But the problem is, I think people seeing how they fit that into their life. And sometimes being a coach is more about life counseling than it is doing a workout, and getting people to see that they can do that too. You know, a infamous story I tell is I had a woman, and she would have she'd have a whole bowl of ice cream every night. I said, you can't do that if this is your goal. I'm like, I have no problem once in a while you having ice cream, but you can't do it every night. And she said, well, my 14-year-old son says we have to have ice cream in the house, and if we have it in the house, I'm going to eat it. And her son happened to be staying right next to her. And he turns and goes, Mom, I don't need it in the house. He totally sold her out. And I turned to her and go, well, now you know you don't have to have it in the house. So I think it's just going like, listen, it's not that you can never have this. You can have it, but we do need to make a compromise with this. And if you're telling me this is your goal and this is meaningful to you, and that's why getting to the deeper meaning is so important, that you're going to have to make some other changes. But you know, if she's having ice cream every night, maybe it's not taking away completely, but going, hey, can we do this twice a week? So again, she doesn't feel deprived. I always use the example, when you start taking things away from people, they almost focus on it more. Like if I told you you can never eat paint chips again, you may have never eaten paint chips, but you're like, I want a paint chip. He just told me I can't have it. It's like, you know, kids when you say don't do that, or you can't have that. So I think it's about making it work in their life and making sure that it's not about being extreme. It's about finding compromise and going, if this goal is meaningful for you, this is how this works into your lifestyle. Because if the lifestyle is not there, then you know anything you do in the gym is going to be hard to gain a benefit from. So it does start at a very foundational level. So you know, when I worked with clients, the first couple sessions would be just talking about their lives and like what their daily habits were. And you'd be surprised how many people form habits that they're just completely unaware of, that are sort of hurting them. But they'll develop these different coping mechanisms or whatever they are over time.
Yes, and I think that coaches are more almost like developing an area where they're therapists more. And it's a longer-term solution as well. It doesn't mean you can go, I guess, for 3 months, you know, to a coach and then expect that your life is completely changed. But it seems like this is really a longer-term process where you need to really adjust the environment. Like you said, context matters so much also for the dopamine production. Just the idea of, oh, I have ice cream in my fridge or my freezer creates this dopamine surge. And then you're already rewarded for something. And also dopamine works, you know, in the movement area. So then they're actually moving towards the freezer, taking it out, eating it, and it's not even their fault.
No.
And that's why, you have to change the environment. So it's long.
Absolutely. I mean, I think most of us, I know my family was, if you were sad, you were rewarded with food. If you were happy, you were rewarded with food. So, you know, I have a friend who's a nutritionist, and she doesn't spend a lot of time teaching people what to eat, because it's not like people don't know vegetables are good for them. You know, she tries to help people build a healthier relationship with food, because that's really the major problem. It's not that people are unaware of what's healthy. I don't think anyone thinks eating pizza every night is healthy for them, or eating a bowl of ice cream is healthy for them, but they don't have a good relationship with food, and food is probably one of the most emotional things that we go to. It's one of the most emotional drugs we have. So I think getting people to have a healthy relationship, not taking things completely away from them, not making them crazy about it, and making it work within their life where they can be healthier and they see a positive outcome, and teaching them, when you do feel sad, what should I do instead? When I'm happy, what should I do instead? And find better ways to reward themselves, that they start to have those, you know, better relationships with.
I like that, having a relationship with with food in general, because also seasonal and regional nutrition, it makes sense because we communicate every time we eat something from the environment, with the environment. Absolutely. And getting people to understand that again.
And it's hard too, because food is one of the most social things we do too.
Yep. And it's so abstract nowadays. But change of gears. We talked about basketball before. Is there actually a sport that you really like to maybe even work with, or coaches from a different area in particular? Is there something that's your personal favorite?
I do. I mean, I still love the sport. You know, when I played at the university, I got a little disenchanted, because as you go to higher levels, and you know this, it becomes more of a business.
Yes.
And so it's not as much fun and play. as you remember as a kid. And I've worked with a couple NBA guys, and it's
Oh,
different.
who'd you work with? May I ask?
Marcus Liberty, who used to play for the Detroit Pistons,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple other guys. And it's just like one of those things where I almost enjoy the high school kids more.
Mm-hmm.
The high school kids are old enough where they can do more complex things, but they're not the professional where they feel privileged and like, oh, you should just, you got to do everything I say and this and that. So, I mean, and a lot of times the high school kid, I love working with the kid that's not the best, because, if they're just driven to be better, they're really fun to work with. Sometimes the best kids, things come so naturally. I'm sure you had teammates like this that they don't want to try that hard.
A teammate of mine who was on the roster of the Cavs last season.
Okay.
He was really talented. He also worked really hard. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I had that experience where when I went to the States, actually, I noticed Germany basketball has not that same sort of excitement about it as in the States. And in the States, I felt average at first. It's like, wow, I was one of the better players in my year. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden there, I said, okay, I might need to find another idea for a future job.
I've gone through that process. That happened to me in high school. I always tell the story. I was about 15 years old. And growing up in Chicago, we played against a lot of good players. Like Kevin Garnett was in our time.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Corey Maggette, who played for the Clippers, was in that time.
Big guy.
Yeah, and so, I tell the story. I knew I wasn't going to be a pro athlete during one game where, a shot goes up, I go to block out, and bam, something hits me in the backside of the head. I'm like, did someone just elbow me in the head? And it was a guy's foot, and he was hanging from the rim. I'm like, I better start studying a lot more, because I don't think I'm not going to be in the NBA. I don't think people realize how elite these guys are. Yes. And someone made a good point today, James Breeze, that like, even in fitness, bring it to fitness a little bit, like we're so focused on the elite, the 1%, and by the laws of nature, like most of us are very average, and we need to do a better job of focusing on the people that are not elite,
right,
and making them better. I mean, the elite people usually it's just like don't screw them up, and so I like to work with the people that just want to get better.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, Josh, let me ask you one last question, because we're in the Flow Grade show here.
Okay.
And it's all about, getting into the flow state. And for you personally, do you have something that really gets you into sort of a flow where you forget time, where you're just in the moment? It could be going on a hike or going rafting or whatever. Is there something?
Yeah, I mean, it's super simple, So my wife makes fun of me because sometimes I'll come home from these trips and we have 3 dogs at home. She's like, "You're happier to see the dogs than me." So I have a special place for my dogs, and so we do a walk every morning. It sounds super simple, right? But we do about an hour walk, and we walk around our community, and that's just sort of my time to decompress, and I don't have to talk, and I just try to be more aware of my surroundings. I think in this digital age, we are so quick to not be present, and that's why we've seen, the statistics are crazy. In the last 25 years, depression, anxiety has gone up 70%. And not surprisingly, what's become popular in the last 25 years, social media. And so I think people have become so disconnected from the real world that they crave connection more than ever. So for me, that's a huge connection point, and it's super simple because I'm just with the people I love the most, and we're doing something super simple. There's just, no expectations. We're just doing something enjoyable, and we're just trying to connect. And you can say like, well, they're the animals and just walking around, but it's about the intent that you put behind such a simple action. And I think for a lot of people, they look for these grand things to do to sort of reconnect. And sometimes it's the most simple things and connecting with the people that are already there that are most meaningful. And you don't have to do a grand action to really start to, find your flow again, if you will, and really connect with the things that are most important to you, because oftentimes they're right in front of you.
Very cool. Now, Josh, when people want to get in touch with you, and I'm sure some listeners are really excited to get to know you, maybe at the next Functional Training Summit, and Perform Better obviously promotes you quite well here in Germany.
Yeah,
but
awesome.
Where can they find you? Do you have a website as well where people can check
you
out?
Most of our websites dedicate to our system, so if people want to see what our system is about, we have a lot of free content there. We're very much about, education, so we want people to see what we're about before they invest with us, and we always think of it as an investment in themselves. So that website is just dvrtfitness.com. We try to make content that almost everyone can take away something valuable from. We have over 1,000 free videos, so like I said, I've been doing this a long time. The video's gotten better over the years, but there's that content. We're on social media. If people just look up my name, Josh Henkin, or look up DVRT Fitness, they'll be able to find us. And hopefully they like lots of dog pictures or fitness stuff, because if you like that stuff, then that's what I post mostly about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.